Well, there's good news here in Washington, D.C. Job approval for Congress is up. Now, you're not likely to see any fireworks going off behind me here as representatives in Congress celebrate, because when I say it's up, it is up to 17%, which is pretty dismal. That means about 80% of Americans at this point do not approve of the way Congress is handling its job. Now, the low point of all time, at least back to 1979, when Gallup started tracking Congress approval in this fashion, was 10%. That came in February of this year, so that's why I say we're up. We're up from 10% to 17%, which is certainly an improvement, but not very good. In fact, if you look at the numbers, you'll see that President Barack Obama's job approval rating has been running about 30 points higher than the job approval rating for Congress. Let's look back in history a little. There have been a couple of other points where Congress approval has been quite low. One of them came in 1979 when we had it down into the teens at that point. In June, in fact, of 1979, it was at 19%. Then fast forward to 1992. George H.W. Bush was president. The economy was perceived as terrible. And we had a job approval rating in March of that year down at 18%. So those were a couple of other low points. Job approval ratings got better through the 1990s. In January of 1999, for example, that's an interesting time for Congress because that was after the House had voted to impeach Bill Clinton and before the Senate took its vote in February of 1999 and voted not to convict him of impeachment. But nevertheless, at that point, we had job approval rating, as you see in front of you there, at 50%. The economy was booming. It was the tail end of the dot-com boom at about that point. We had 56 job approval rating in December of 2000. And then into 2001, we had job approval ratings of 55% at about this time that year, in March and in April of that year. So things were looking pretty good. Actually, congressional job approval started to go down at that point, and then 9/11 occurred. Following that, in October of 2001, we had the highest job approval rating for Congress in our Gallup poll history. That was 84%. One of the famous rally effects that we see from time to time, the president, George W. Bush's job approval rating was at 90% at about that same time. So when things happen to the country, like the terrorist attacks, Americans rally around their institutions. But job approval ratings then through last decades began to fall down and down and down, and in fact were as low as 20%. In April of 2008, went up some after Obama was inaugurated, and now they're back down again, although, as I mentioned, clawing their way back up just a little. What are the implications of this low regard that Americans have for Congress for the congressional elections this coming fall? Remember, all 435 elected representatives to the House will be reelected, or will at least be running for office, and about a third of the Senate will be running. Well, we don't know. Given that the Senate is controlled by the Democrats and the House by the Republicans, it's hard to know how Americans will take out their anger at Congress at the voting booths come November. We'll keep monitoring that and see who may benefit, or if neither party really benefits when the dust settles after next fall's election. Bottom line, congressional job approval at this point, April 2012, at 17%. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, Gallup's Editor-in-Chief.